Continuing the Basics first anniversary month with another Patreon-sponsored episode, supporter Locoman requested a look at a Transformers comic book that's unexpectedly returned to prominence in the last year. This week, it's the Basics on Hearts of Steel. Hearts of Steel was a 4-issue comic book miniseries released by IDW Publishing in 2006. Only the third original Transformers story the company ever published. It was one of their earliest experiments at telling stories outside their main ongoing continuity. Envisioned as being just the first in a line of miniseries collectively titled Transformers Evolutions, a Transformers answer to Marvel's What If or DC's Elseworlds, imagining alternate universes in which the Transformers were active on Earth in different time periods, like the Renaissance or the Roman Empire. Hearts of Steel was set in the mid to late 19th century, just after the end of the Industrial Revolution, and was scripted by Punisher and Batman writer Chuck Dixon. Ted McKeever was originally announced as the artist, but for unknown reasons was replaced by well-established Transformers talent Guido Guidi. Hearts of Steel presents the Transformers as having arrived on Earth eons ago, adopting the forms of prehistoric animals and continuing their war, until the onset of the Ice Age forced them to enter hibernation underground. They awoke in the 19th century, in the midst of the construction of the Great American Railroads. Bumblebee and the Autobots befriended the steel-driving American folk hero John Henry, while Starscream and the Decepticons exploited the disgraced young inventor Tobias Muldoon to help them master the new technologies of Earth. Guidi designed brand new period-appropriate alternate modes for the cast. The Autobots and the Insecticons all became train engines and carriages, while Starscream and the other Seekers became steampunk flying machines, Shockwave an ironclad battleship, and Scourge a zeppelin, to name a few. Designs were also created for Optimus Prime and Megatron, but in the story, the two leaders never emerged from hibernation. Realizing too late the Decepticons' evil intentions, Muldoon abandoned them, but corrupt industrialist Jacob Lee Bonaventure took his place to help the Decepticons complete construction of their Astro Train, aboard which they began heading towards New York City, there to seize control of Thomas Edison's new electrical power plant. Together with his friend Mark Twain, Muldoon joined forces with the Autobots and John Henry and pursued the Decepticons along the rails. Bumblebee and John Henry won the day when they were able to switch tracks on the villains, sending the Decepticons and Bonaventure plunging off a cliff to their doom. Now, as it happened, Hearts of Steel wound up being the only Evolutions miniseries ever published, as the release of the live-action movie the following year led IDW to direct their efforts toward it instead. Fans had every reason to assume that this would be the last they would ever see of the Hearts of Steel universe. Until 6 years later, when IDW released the crossover event, Infestation 2. A sequel to the previous year's Infestation event, which was about an army of zombies invading different universes. Infestation 2 was about the Elder Gods, ancient monsters from the stories of horror writer H.P. Lovecraft, doing the same, and the Transformers universe they invaded was the world of Hearts of Steel. Set a few years after the original Hearts of Steel miniseries, the 2-issue Infestation 2 tie-in reunited Dixon and Guidi for a story that drew heavily on Lovecraft's tales of the monster Cthulhu. Fish people from an ancient city beneath the sea reanimated the Decepticons and used them to take over a small Canadian fishing town, enslaving the minds of its populace to awaken the Elder Gods slumbering beneath the ocean. Catching wind of this new threat, the Autobots approached Tobias Muldoon once again, this time for aid in reactivating Optimus Prime, who was the only one with the power to stop the Elder God. With the help of Nikola Tesla, they succeeded in bringing Prime back online, and the Autobot leader sent the Elder God back to the bottom of the ocean. And again, it seemed like that would be the end for the Hearts of Steel world, but it turned out IDW weren't done with quirky crossovers just yet. 2 years later, the 2014 crossover event, X-Files Conspiracy, followed the trio of conspiracy theorists known as the Lone Gunmen, as they attempted to prevent the outbreak of an alien virus. Their mission brought them into contact with the Ghostbusters and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it was when they crossed paths with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee that the whole story was unexpectedly revealed to be taking place in the present day of the Hearts of Steel universe. Working with the two Autobots, the gunman rescued Ratchet from Skylogic Systems, who had captured him and studied his Cybertronian technobiology to engineer the virus. An X-Files crossover of all things seemed about as strange as IDW's use of Hearts of Steel could possibly get, so what happened next nobody could have predicted. In the 2017 series, Revolutionaries, writer John Barber decided to alter history and revealed that, in fact, Hearts of Steel had taken place in the mainstream IDW universe. Now, this was technically impossible, since the Transformers featured in the series weren't on Earth at that point in IDW history. But with Guido Guidi returning to help tell the story, the truth was told. The characters that we had thought were Bumblebee, Optimus Prime, and all the other famous faces of Generation 1 were, in fact, merely similar-looking Transformers from the Cybertronian colony planet Eucharis. They had crashed on Earth thousands of years ago when their ship was shot down by the Decepticon Shockwave. Their memories were damaged in the crash, and they were reprogrammed by Shockwave to think that they were Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and the rest, so that the Decepticon scientist could use them to play out the Cybertronian War in miniature on Ice Age Earth, as a kind of test model for him to study. The Hearts of Steel version of Optimus Prime, for instance, was really named Domitius Major, while Bumblebee was actually Centurion. When more important matters drew Shockwave's attention away, the Eucharians were left unsupervised, and the events of Hearts of Steel and Infestation 2 played out as seen in the original comics. The X-Files story was not part of mainstream IDW continuity. In this version of events, all the Eucharian imposters died out over the following century, leaving Centurion, his original memories having resurfaced, as the last survivor of his crew. During World War II, he was found and taken in by the scientist Garrison Krieger, who spent the next 70 years studying him, seeking to use him for his own evil ends. No longer the upbeat and optimistic Bumblebee, years of conflict had left Centurion embittered and convinced that all Cybertronians deserved destruction, so he swore loyalty to Krieger and even battled the old Autobot Cup and his human allies when they interfered with Krieger's plans, which included reanimating some of the other Eucharians as his mindless enforcers. It was another victim of Krieger's experiments, the cyborg superhero Mike Power, the Atomic Man, who stopped Centurion, using the link Krieger had created between them to take over Centurion's body. Power's consciousness absorbed Centurions, and they merged into a new entity who allied with the Autobots against Krieger. Now a being who's lived 3 lives under 3 identities from 3 different worlds, yet who truly belongs to none of them, Centurion's currently trying to find new direction and purpose on Cybertron. But if we've learned anything from the unexpected persistence of Hearts of Steel, it's that his is a story that doesn't quite feel like it's done yet. Does his history mean he has a role to play in the impending return to life of the real Bumblebee? Or does his connection to Shockwave mean he'll be involved in the Decepticons' plans for the coming of Unicron in this summer's finale storyline? As the IDW universe draws to a close after 13 years, Centurion's presence provides an unusual link back to the diverse beginnings of the company's Transformers comics. Hearts of Steel really was the little Cybertronian engine that could. And those are the basics on Hearts of Steel. Thanks to Locoman for sponsoring this episode. Check the description below for links to where you can read the various stories that make up this strange steampunk saga. Share your thoughts on it and its designs in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe for more from the world of the Transformers.